The neighborhood I call home is a modest, tree-lined cul-de-sac where people value their privacy and the quiet predictability of suburban life. I have lived in the same brick house at the end of the loop for 22 years. My routine is simple. I spend my weekends restoring vintage motorcycles in my garage and tending to my front lawn. That peace was entirely eradicated the day Julian moved in next door. Julian was a 20-something aspiring influencer who treated the entire world like a backdrop for his social media content. He constantly wore mirrored sunglasses, spoke in relentless hustle culture platitudes, and possessed a deeply inflated sense of his own importance. He leased the 4-bedroom property next to mine and immediately transformed the quiet, residential street into his personal commercial staging area. Julian ran an exotic car rental company. He leased high-end, absurdly modified vehicles to tourists and local teenagers who wanted to flex on the internet for a few hours. Instead of renting a proper commercial lot, he used our cul-de-sac. Within a week of his arrival, the street was completely choked with inventory. A bright purple Lamborghini, a neon green McLaren, 2 oversized G-Wagons, and a fleet of aggressively tuned sports cars were parked everywhere. They crowded the curbs, they blocked the mailboxes, they routinely overlapped my driveway, making it nearly impossible for me to back my own truck out into the street. The noise was unbearable. Clients would arrive at all hours of the night to pick up or drop off the vehicles. They would rev the high-performance engines at 3 in the morning, rattling the windows of every house on the block. I decided to address the issue directly. On a Tuesday afternoon, I walked over to Julian. He was leaning against a bright orange Ferrari, filming a video for his followers on a stabilized phone gimbal. I waited for him to finish speaking to his camera. I politely asked him to move the Ferrari, as its rear bumper was extending nearly 3 feet across the entrance to my driveway. Julian lowered his phone. He looked me up and down, taking in my faded denim jacket and work boots. A profoundly condescending smirk spread across his face. "Listen, old man," Julian said, his tone dripping with unearned superiority. "I am running a high 6-figure enterprise here. This street is public parking. If you do not have the spatial awareness to navigate your little pickup truck around real machinery, that is a personal problem. Do not interrupt my workflow again." He turned his back on me and resumed filming. A deep, quiet focus settled over my thoughts. A lesser man might have initiated a screaming match or vandalized the paint job under the cover of darkness. Calling the local traffic enforcement was equally useless. The police would occasionally drive by, issue a meaningless $60 parking citation, and leave. To a man renting cars for $2,000 a day, a parking ticket was nothing more than an acceptable operating expense. I did not want to inconvenience him. I wanted to permanently dismantle his operation. Before I retired, I spent 3 decades working as a senior risk assessor for a major commercial underwriter. I specialized in auditing high-liability corporate assets. I know exactly how the financial architecture of the luxury vehicle market operates. Nobody in their 20s genuinely owns 12 exotic cars outright. They are heavily leveraged, bound by incredibly restrictive lending covenants. I returned to my garage, wiped the engine grease from my hands, and opened my laptop. I started by pulling the license plate data and cross-referencing the LLC name printed on the promotional decals plastered across his back windows. Julian's company was called Apex Velocity Rentals. The corporate registry listed the address of his rented house as the primary operating headquarters. I dug deeper into the commercial lien databases. The entire fleet was financed through a notoriously aggressive, high-interest luxury lending syndicate based on the West Coast. Lending millions of dollars in depreciating automotive assets is an incredibly fragile business. To secure those loans, the syndicate mandates absolute ironclad commercial insurance policies. I pulled the standard underwriting requirements for the specific tier of exotic fleet financing. The legal stipulations were beautifully rigorous. To maintain the insurance coverage and the loan validity, the borrower is strictly required to store the vehicles in a gated, climate-controlled, commercial-zoned facility equipped with 24-hour surveillance. Parking $2 million worth of uninsured collateral on a public suburban street, exposed to weather, vandalism, and unregulated traffic, is a catastrophic violation of the master loan agreement. I began compiling a meticulous portfolio of evidence. Every morning at dawn, I photographed the entire fleet covered in morning dew, parked haphazardly along the curbs. I recorded high-definition videos of his clients dropping the cars off in the middle of the night, leaving the keys unattended on the hoods while they waited for their Uber rides. I documented every single instance of the vehicles resting outside a residential structure. I spent 2 weeks building an undeniable, devastating case. I bypassed local authorities entirely. I sent the encrypted portfolio directly to the primary loss prevention director of the lending syndicate, copying the underwriting department of their commercial insurance provider. I included a brief, professional summary outlining the extreme liability exposure. I provided the exact coordinates of the vehicles and the documented proof that the borrower was operating a commercial rental hub out of a residential lease without secure storage. When a corporate entity realizes $2 million of their money is sitting unprotected on a suburban street, they do not send a warning email. They move with terrifying, immediate precision. The insurance provider officially revoked the fleet coverage due to gross negligence within 48 hours of receiving my file. The moment the insurance lapsed, the lending syndicate triggered the immediate default clause on every single vehicle loan. Julian was completely oblivious. He continued posting his arrogant videos, bragging about his unparalleled success, entirely unaware that the financial ground beneath his expensive sneakers had already evaporated. The reckoning arrived on a foggy Thursday morning. I was awake at 5 o'clock, sitting at my workbench in the garage, slowly polishing the chrome exhaust pipes of my vintage motorcycle. The door was rolled up, letting in the cool, damp morning breeze. The quiet hum of the neighborhood was interrupted by the distinct, heavy rumble of diesel engines. A coordinated convoy of 6 heavy-duty flatbed tow trucks and 3 specialized wheel-lift wreckers rolled into the cul-de-sac. They did not use their sirens or their flashing amber lights. They moved like a military strike team, positioning themselves strategically around the sprawling perimeter of Julian's exotic fleet. 4 men stepped out of a lead SUV. They were not local municipal towers. They were specialized corporate recovery agents hired by the lending syndicate to execute a multi-vehicle repossession. They worked with astonishing speed. They attached specialized dollies to the wheels of the Lamborghini to bypass the electronic parking brakes. They winched the McLarens onto the flatbeds. The sound of heavy steel chains clinking against the asphalt echoed loudly through the fog. The commotion finally woke Julian. The front door of his rental house flew open. He stumbled out onto the porch wearing nothing but silk pajama pants, holding his phone. He looked at the fleet of tow trucks in absolute bewilderment. "Hey, what the hell are you doing?" Julian roared, his voice cracking wildly. "Put those cars down! Those belong to my company. I will have you all arrested for grand theft." He sprinted down the driveway, waving his arms frantically. The lead recovery agent, a tall man holding a thick stack of legal clipboards, stepped forward to intercept him. He did not look intimidated. He looked deeply bored. "Julian Vance?" the agent asked, his voice carrying clearly across the street. "We are executing an immediate commercial repossession order on behalf of the primary lien holder." Julian's face flushed a mottled, unhealthy purple before settling into a sickly, pale yellow. "What are you talking about? My payments are completely up to date. You have no right to touch my inventory." The agent handed him a thick stack of documents. "Your commercial insurance policy was voided yesterday for severe covenant violations regarding secure storage. You are currently in breach of contract on 12 separate high-yield loans. The entire principal balance is due immediately. Since you cannot produce $2.4 million in cash this morning, the lender is seizing the collateral. Step away from the machinery." Julian looked down at the paperwork. His hands began to tremble violently. The arrogant, untouchable disruptor persona completely disintegrated in the damp morning air. "You cannot do this," Julian pleaded, his voice dropping an octave into pure desperation. "I have client bookings this weekend. My entire business model relies on this weekend. Just give me 24 hours to secure a storage lot. I can fix the insurance." "The lender is no longer interested in your business model, sir," the agent replied coldly. "Please clear the street. We have a schedule to maintain." Julian fell to his knees on the damp grass. He clutched the repossession documents to his chest. He watched helplessly as the heavy winches pulled the bright orange Ferrari onto the back of a flatbed truck. The neon green McLaren followed. The G-wagons were lifted into the air. His entire fabricated empire, built on leased aesthetics and complete disregard for the people around him, was systematically dismantled and hauled away in less than 45 minutes. The tow truck drivers secured their loads, the diesel engines roared to life, and the convoy slowly rolled out of the cul-de-sac, leaving behind a vast, beautifully empty expanse of black asphalt. Julian remained kneeling on his lawn, staring blankly at the vacant spaces where his identity used to be parked. He was entirely bankrupt. He owed hundreds of thousands of dollars in early termination penalties and recovery fees to a syndicate that would happily garnish his wages for the rest of his natural life. He slowly turned his head and looked across the property line. He saw me sitting in my brightly lit garage. I was wiping down a wrench with a clean shop rag. Julian did not say a word. The realization finally pierced his shattered ego. He understood that his blatant disrespect had triggered an investigation he was never equipped to survive. He had picked a fight over a few feet of driveway space and ended up losing his entire future. I let the heavy clanking of the tow truck winches do all the talking. I wiped the last smudge of grease off my wrench, hit the button to close my garage door, and finally enjoyed the beautiful sound of absolutely nothing.